to the North Carolina Student Candidate Forum. We can't wait to hear from all of our panelists, and hopefully all of our attendees can get to ask some questions and learn a little bit more. I'm Eileen. I serve as a student advisor to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, and I'm a leader of GenerationNation. This forum is hosted by GenerationNation and NC Civics Coalition in collaboration with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council, Mecklenburg Teen Democrats, Mecklenburg Teen Republicans, NC Teen Democrats, NC Teen Republicans, and NC YMCA Youth and Government. We have invited students from all across North Carolina to this forum. But now we're going to introduce our forum moderators who are leaders of GenerationNation and in these other great organizations. April, who serves on this NC Civics Coalition Youth Advisory Council and as a vice president for the Mecklenburg Teen Republicans. Jaden, who is the president for the Mecklenburg Teen Republicans and is an officer with the NC Teen Republicans. And Zahara, who is the president of the Mecklenburg Teen Democrats and is an officer for the NC Teen Democrats. All right.
Hello, everyone. First, we're just going to review the format and share some information about what the NC Superintendent of Public Instruction does. So mainly, we're going to talk about what is important, the important parts that goes into this big role that affects students across North Carolina. So what exactly does the NC Superintendent do? So mainly a big part of their job is basically regulating the different things that happen across North Carolina when it comes to education. So they serve within the North Carolina executive branch, and they're basically in charge of the different parts of the day-to-day operations within the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So they serve as the North Carolina Council of State, and they also have a secretary and chief administrative officer on the State Board of Education. So
So the overall Department of Public Instruction, which the superintendent oversees, is responsible for general public school laws for all grades, kindergarten through 12, and public schools across the whole state and across multiple counties.
The superintendent's role includes overseeing funds for DPIs approved by the State Board of Education, advocating and informing the state on important issues and information about the needs of public schools, working with the governor and the General Assembly, supervising and managing all public school system matters, managing and carrying out all SBE rules and regulations. And here's just another infographic just showing all the amazing things that the State Superintendent of Public Instruction does. And if you want to learn more about this office, you can search on the NC State statutes, on Wikipedia and Ballotpedia. So we definitely encourage all of you to take a look at it and just learn more about it, because it's a super fascinating and great position.
So going forward, we will have a time for questions from the moderators from the organizations conducting this forum and the audience as well. So when you guys submit questions as the audience, let's make sure to keep them focused towards the topic of this forum, which is understanding where each candidate stands on key issues. Use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to share questions since the chat is disabled, and try to ask questions that allow the candidates to expand on their platform instead of a simple yes or no answer. And while we do that, let's make sure to be courteous and to understand again why we're here. And we're looking forward to a great forum.
Now we are going to meet the candidates for NC Superintendent of Public Instruction. So we just asked each candidate to introduce themselves. They have 90 seconds each. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our amazing Democratic candidate, Mr. Mo Green. You just have 90 seconds. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Great. First of all, thanks so much for organizing this event tonight, and thanks to all of the various organizations being so interested in public education in North Carolina. So for me, I'll start with saying I was the former superintendent of Guilford County Schools for 7.5 years. Prior to that, I was the deputy superintendent and general counsel, top lawyer, if you will, for Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools for 7.5 years. Most recently, I served as the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, which is a foundation that supports many causes across the state of North Carolina, including supporting public education. And then finally, I'll just lift up that I also have served on any number of boards and commissions focused on issues related to public school students, including homelessness, the arts, athletics, served as the president of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, also related to issues around media, community support, and policy as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green, for being here.
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce Michele Morrow, the Republican nominee for state superintendent.
Thank you so much. And it is a huge encouragement to be with you guys. It is exciting when young people understand civics and the importance of maintaining that we are a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. So we're going to need you guys to be engaged in this process. So it's always encouraging. I am a mom of 5. I am a nurse. I've been a nurse for 31 years, and I actually went to school there in Charlotte and graduated from South Meck. And then I went on to UNC Chapel Hill. That's where I got my nursing degree. I have also taught for the last 10 years here in Wake County, and it's been biology, chemistry, civics, and government, and Spanish as well, because my husband and I were missionaries in Mexico. 3 of our 5 kids were born there. And really the last 6 years, I have been going as a legislative liaison to speak with school board members, county commissioners, as well as the General Assembly in order to be promoting safety in our schools, medical freedom. As a nurse, I've been very concerned with what's happening with a lot of our students and their mental health issues, as well as focusing on getting back to academics. I really believe that we need to focus on quality education, critical thinking skills, and exactly what you guys are doing here, which is the ability to have civil discourse and logical debate. That really is the foundation for how we had one of the greatest government documents in the history of the world. It was through very difficult and hard-fought debates and discussions. So I appreciate this, and I hope to ensure that every student in the state of North Carolina not only is safe, but also in their classrooms. I also want to ensure that everybody they are equipped to reach their fullest potential. I want to expand CTE programs throughout all of our 115 districts.
Thank you so much, candidates. We really enjoyed hearing your introductions and getting to know more about you guys. Now we will begin to ask our questions. A lot of our students here have taken time to compile questions over the time leading up to this forum. And so we just ask that each candidate keep their answers to 1 minute or less. If you need to do a follow-up response, that can just be about 30 seconds or so. So students in the audience, if you have any questions, please share it in the Q&A box. Jaden, you can go ahead and also ask the first question.
All right. Once again, thank you both candidates for being here. Our first question is, why do you want to be North Carolina Superintendent of Public Instruction? And this question will go to Mr. Green first, then followed by Ms. Morrow's answer.
Yeah, so I want to be the next state superintendent of public instruction because I'm deeply concerned about a number of things. One, the woeful underfunding of our public schools, the level of disrespect shown to our educators and the need to pay them more, and then certainly wanting to see if we can improve outcomes academically for each and every one of our students. Certainly, I believe that I have a vision for how to make that happen. To utilize a vision we utilized when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, and that is intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education, and then combine it with a focus on excellence. We'll use that in the same way that we were able to increase student outcomes in Guilford County Schools, increase graduation rates, and also be recognized as a national district of character. Yeah, so, and just because I don't have a good sense of what the timing is. I'm trying to be sure I'm respectful of that without going over. Is there any way someone can say you got, or put up, you got 10 seconds left, or anything like that? Just so we're, at least for me, I'm trying to be as respectful as I can with the time allotment.
Yes,
Great,
absolutely.
thank you.
Tomorrow.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and ask my question from the North Carolina Teen Democrats. This question is for Mrs. Morrow. First, what specific measures do you plan to implement to enhance student safety, especially in light of the increase in school violence and threats?
Yes, that's one of my main focus. I didn't get to answer the question of why I'm running, but I really think so education really is the great opportunity maker. And I think how great an education system we have really determines the direction of our state. But one of the biggest things that we have to ensure is that every staff and student is safe within the school environment, which is why I started a school safety advisory council with 12 professionals from around the country who are right now, they're looking at best practices throughout our country that's for things that we can implement as soon as I get into office. I think we need student resource officers, but we also need to have we have to have discipline within the classroom. We need an understanding of what is expected of every student in terms of conduct, as well as their education responsibilities. And so I really want to make sure that we have clear communication and we empower our administrators. Administrators, the number one job is to create that culture of collaboration and teamwork and respect so that the teachers and the students really want to be in the school setting and they are getting the education that they need to be successful.
Absolutely. And we would also love to hear your answer to the first question of why do you want to be NC Superintendent of Public Instruction?
No worries. Yeah. So I love children. I have 5 kids of my own. They've been in public, private, and homeschool. And I truly believe that every person is created with gifts and talents and strengths. And it should be the education system's job to partner with parents to figure out kind of what makes each child tick. And then we should give them that solid foundation, not just of intellect, but also of skills necessary so that they can pursue careers that are going to be financially rewarding and allow them to have independence and also to be able to succeed in the adult world. And so I think that we can make our school system the best in the nation. I think in 2024, we totally have the ability to do that. And there's really no reason why there is a big discrepancy in a lot of our different districts, even though we have very changing demographics and just kind of lifestyles throughout the state. I think we can make sure that our public school system is the absolute best option for every student in North Carolina.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Moving forward to some of the questions we have in the Q&A, Christopher Brew asked, if you were to win, what would you plan to do first? How will you do it? This question would just go to Mo Green first, please.
Great, and just so I'm clear, do I get a chance to answer the question about safety, or I don't get to answer that question?
Yes, you do. You can answer that question first if you'd like to.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because I do think that this is, as my opponent has said, a critically important issue for our schools across the state. So I would say that there are many, many issues and things one must do with regards to safety. I'll lift up just 4. The first of which is I do think we have to have an increased number of mental health professionals working with our students. Our students are going through lots of issues, lots of challenges, and they need professional guidance as they're going through that, and support as well. Second would be effective relations with law enforcement. And certainly my experience, I've had lots of strong relationships with law enforcement. In fact, I actually supervised the law enforcement division in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools when I was deputy superintendent. Third would be what I call hardening of schools. So we've got to be sure that our facilities themselves are safe places. So metal detectors, if you will, things like that. Cameras in appropriate places, double entries. And then finally, character development. I do believe that each and every one of our students must learn what's the right way to be and how to be in school.
Absolutely. And then Mo, we'll come back to you, but Michelle, we would love for you to answer what is the first thing you plan to do once you're in office?
You know, the first thing I'd like to do, even after on November 6th, is probably ride a bus and then have lunch with the bus drivers and go hang out in the teachers' lounges and talk to principals. I think the first thing that really needs to happen in our public education system is we need to build some bridges. As you guys stated at the beginning, there are 3 entities that our Constitution states are responsible for ensuring that everybody gets that sound basic education throughout North Carolina. That's the General Assembly, the State Board of Education, as well as the Superintendent and the DPI. We already have the entire state that's kind of broken down into 8 different regions. I think we need to start having a lot more meetings with people in those regions, not just the principals and superintendents and school boards, but I think we need to bring in other staff and say, what do you need from the DPI in order to be able to be successful and to ensure that every student is reaching their full potential within your district? I think communication has to be number 1. And so that's what I plan to do first thing. And then safety and discipline in the classroom is going to be number 2 at the top.
Mr. Green?
So after I catch my breath and really step back for a moment and be sure that I sit in a place of gratitude for having been given this awesome responsibility to lead our public school system, then I will get to work. And so the things that I will be focused on, I will be, the things that I've outlined in the pillars that I've included on our website. You can go to mogreenfornc.com and see those. But this is really about ultimately putting together a comprehensive strategic plan that will move our district forward. And so what that's going to require is a lot of listening and learning and conversations. It's become a brand of mine. To do that, it's called Mo Wants to Know. And so that's the way I'll be operating, meeting with students, convene a students advisory council, we'll have parents advisory council, we'll have an educator advisory council, business advisory council, lots of councils. And I'll also just be out in communities all across the state, being sure that I'm learning about the issues as we put together the.
Thank you very much. This next question is from the North Carolina Teen Republicans. And this question is for both candidates, but if we could start with Ms. Morrow first. Do you think North Carolina's public schools meet the educational standards they need to meet? If not, what solutions do you have in mind?
You know, tragically, I don't think that we are. When we see the statistics that last year, 75% of our 8th graders actually were not found to be proficient in math, reading, or science when they were compared with their national peers. I think we need to do better. And I think that the way that we do that is ensuring that in kindergarten through 5th grade specifically, that no one should be passing on into middle school until they can show mastery of at least reading, writing, and math. I think those are the foundational pillars on which all higher education is going to be able to happen. And so that's going to be my first thing. I think we need to really buckle down on academics and get the political and kind of the activism roles out of our classrooms and focus on scholastics. I think everybody, as I said, everybody has the potential. Kids want to learn, and they're in those younger grades. They want to please, and I think we need to tap into that. And then we need to expand even the gifted and talented program as well for high schoolers, so that those people can be challenged at every level.
Mr. Green, would you like to answer the question?
Sure. So I would say that we've got mixed reviews with regards to whether students across our entire state are meeting the educational standards. There are certainly places where they are, students that are, and then there are many who are not. What do we need to do about that? I believe that we, number one, need to focus on additional financial resources for our schools so that we can bring in the kind of professionals. We can do things like lower class sizes. bring in extra tutors, the kinds of things that will support our students wherever they might be along that journey. And the reason I lift up resources is because if you compare our state to the national average at $16,000 per pupil, Virginia is a little over 14,000, South Carolina is a little over 15,000, North Carolina a little over 11,000. This is a huge, huge difference. And this is where if we can get those resources, then I believe we can start executing on the very issues that we need to, including improving student outcomes for all of our students.
Starting with Mr. Green, this question is from the YMCA Youth and Government Association. They said, how do you plan to engage civic engagement and youth programs such as the ones here in your policies and initiatives?
Yeah, so I believe that we need to absolutely engage these kinds of organizations and students around issues around civics. So part of the way that that might look like is what we did in Guilford County Schools, where we made service learning a critically important part of the educational journey for our students. And so what that looks like is then engaging various nonprofit organizations and other organizations to be connected with our students so they can actually learn about issues as they may be making a difference in their society. Yeah, so part of service learning is doing the service, but then you actually do the deep work around understanding why these issues are the way they are, writing about them. How can we make them different, whether it's a governmental response or a non-governmental response to doing it as well. So that's how we would think about approaching it at a statewide level.
Mrs. Morrow?
Sure. So having taught civics and government for several years, I am passionate about this. I think one thing is we can really start those conversations even in elementary school, talking about different roles of the government, whether it's local or statewide or federal. I think we're in an amazing place in North Carolina where we should get people that are elected officials to come in and to speak to our students about what their role is and why it's important and how it impacts each individual. I think many of our students see things just on television and they think, okay, well, those people in Washington, they're the ones, because they're always on TV, they're the ones that really make the impact. But who is your school board and your city council and your county commissioners and your mayors? Those really have an impact on our everyday life and how our local taxes and our local building and development and the new businesses that come into our counties, how that is impacted. And so I would love to kind of start that process so that even children, when they're young, maybe middle school, high school, start thinking, oh, that might be something that I want to look into in the future. I think it also helps to keep our elected officials accountable and responsive to the people that they represent.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Sadaya Sadler said in the chat, what is your plan to ensure safety in schools while not creating an environment that criminalizes and restricts students? I'll start with Mrs. Morrow first.
Sure. You know, the entire statement of discipline is not intended to be punitive, especially when children are young. It's all about redirecting. It's all about helping children to handle whatever situation that they find themselves in. And so I think even if we sit down with our youngest students and you ask them, what do you think the rules of our classroom should be? What does it mean to be kind to one another and to share and to take your turns and to be respectful and to be kind? I think if we involve our youngest students into that process, they're going to be learning how they want to be treated, and then they are going to be kind of self-regulating within themselves. I do think that it's important. Many students are dealing with a lot of heavy issues outside in their family. And I think that our schools, our teachers have a window into our children's lives for 8 hours a day that potentially other people don't have. So I think it's important that they be used as a resource. I have said that whenever a student is struggling, the entire family is struggling. And I think we need to bring in those families into the entire process of helping our students to better be able to cope and to manage themselves, because that is a life skill that's going to be very necessary as you go out into the adult world.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, so I certainly think that we need to be sure that we establish effective relationships with law enforcement. And why I use the word effective is critically important because oftentimes we actually, I think, see too much authority to law enforcement. And I'm talking about schools and a lot of the behavioral issues that I think need to actually be handled by school uh, school administrators and even classroom teachers, as opposed to saying law enforcement, you must come in, because that's where you criminalize a lots of behaviors. And so establishing this is what law enforcement does, and this is what school administration does, I think becomes critically important for us not to sort of have those boundaries overstepped, if you will. Once we establish those effective relationships and constantly this requires constant sort of communication, reevaluation along the way, because even when you say it once or twice, there will become issues that will come up that you have to come back into the table and say, is this the appropriate thing for law enforcement versus school administration and educators in general?
Absolutely. One of our main concerns from students is centered around mental health. Since it's on the decline in North Carolina, especially, and many problems are linked to issues stemming from school, how do you plan to address this issue? Starting with Mrs. Morrow.
I would say one of the things that we really need to do is limit time on the telephone, on our cell phones. I think that unfortunately there are a lot of things said and there's a lot of things that happen that we probably wouldn't say face to face. And I think that that's one way that we can start to get children to be able to communicate face to face. It's very important that we understand how our actions and how our words are impacting someone. So you need to be able to see the body language, facial expressions. I think the other thing that we need to recognize is always, as a nurse, we need to focus on academics and different things like that. I think asking people how they feel constantly is actually not a healthy thing. I'm finding that even when you look at people that struggle with anxiety and depression, they've said one of the worst things you can do is sit around and think about how you feel constantly. It's important for you to be reaching out. It's important for you to be in community. It's important for you to be doing things for other people. And I think that that's one of the ways that we need to kind of redirect what's happening in our schools, focus on us being a team. Everyone is in this. When everyone does their job and everyone ends up being successful. And that's one of the ways that we can raise that. But we also need to work with outside resources, as I said before. We need to be focusing on giving our families and our students to outside resources for counseling so that the entire family can handle that situation. Because if a child is suffering, the entire family is suffering.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, so I would say that we, number one, need to focus on getting additional mental health professionals to be working with our students. And so I think about those in maybe three major categories. I think we need to have more counseling support for our students. I believe we need to have more social workers that can work with our students and connect them to resources in our community. And then I think about school psychologists as well. And they, as the professionals, can then help figure out what's the best way to support individual students and groups of students as well. I don't think that it's the best thing to simply try to come up with some sort of thoughts without those professionals being deeply involved in working with our students, because they, after all, are the ones who have gone to school and have the experience and expertise to work best with our students.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from the audience. This is from Eunice. What are your thoughts about offering other opportunities for students who don't plan on college after high school? And this question is for both candidates. We can start with Ms. Morrow.
Okay. Yes, I've already been traveling around the state and meeting with different CTE programs. We have some really fabulous career and technical and trade training happening in North Carolina. I'd like to expand that. I think we need to reach out to businesses and depending on what area you live in, there is very different infrastructure. There's a very different demographic and even geographical differences. So I think we need to look at making sure that every junior and senior has the opportunity to do a work-study program, an apprenticeship, an internship, so that they can be paid to work the first half of a day. The second half can be in your core classes. I think to your point, that's a great question because only 38% right now of our graduates go on immediately to a 4-year degree. So we have got to ensure that 62% is excited about their future. They feel equipped to jump into the job market and to pursue a career that they're going to enjoy. So, and that's also going to help all of these smaller counties that might be struggling economically. It's going to help to draw new businesses into those smaller counties. I think it's important that every student have the possibility of staying and raising the next generation in the area where they lived. And I think we can do that.
Disagree?
Yes, so I believe that we need to first start with an appreciation that all students should be able to do whatever they want to do when they leave high school. And so the way I think about that is then we need to be providing both more career and technical education courses and also then college prep courses, and make it a goal that each student graduate with. Certainly when I was superintendent, we call it completers, sort of at least a set of career and technical education courses at the same time that they would also take and hopefully pass a college course or an advanced placement exam or an international baccalaureate exam. The last thing I think we should be doing is suggesting to young folks, there's only one option or there's only another option, but rather all options should be available. And then the student can make that decision with his or her family or their family at the appropriate time as to where to go next. But we've not blocked off anything along the way. And then I lastly would say we need to expose these opportunities, particularly career and technical education opportunities, as early as middle school.
All right, thank you very much. This next question is from Devin. What specific actions would you take to enhance academic performance? This question is for both candidates, and we can start with Mr. Green.
So I think there are a number of things that we need to focus on, one of which I give credit to the current state superintendent and state board, and that is early literacy skills. I believe that is a fundamental way for us to increase academic performance throughout the student's educational journey. As it turns out, I actually served with that superintendent on a group that helped with the implementation of the science of reading in North Carolina, working with 5 other states in this regard. Beyond the early literacy skills, I do think that other ways of improving academic performance includes, I believe, differentiating resources in a way that we can provide exactly what each child needs, and recognizing that certain schools and school districts will need additional resources given the makeup of the student body that they have, the backgrounds that they are coming from, that will need extra support for them to be effective. So that might mean, for example, lowering class sizes pretty dramatically for certain schools and school districts. That might mean providing extra teacher and teacher assistant support for certain schools and school districts as well.
The question with academic performance, increasing academic performance?
Yes, what specific actions would you take to enhance academic performance?
Okay. Yes, I think we've got to raise the bar. We really need to give our students high expectations, and so that they will be a healthy competition to be excellent. I agree that we have to have earlier detection of issues with even with dyslexia and different neurodevelopmental issues. And so I would like to see that happening within the 4-year-old age range. I'd like to see some of the skills that are necessary that help people to overcome potential learning differences can actually be implemented in every classroom so that you don't have to be taking children out. But when we're talking about even getting into middle school and high school, I think we really need to expand STEM. We need to expand what the different offerings of classes are, and we need to look at what the strongest curriculums are, not only around the United States, but also let's look around the world. Let's see who is really leading the charge in math and in science and in reading and in history, and say, what can we duplicate here in North Carolina? And we need to then train our teachers. We need to make sure that all of our training for our teachers is practical, and it's all focused on scholastic improvement and the life skills that our students are going to need.
Thank you so much. Here we'll be kind of entering the lightning round. So we'll ask our questions and then you'll be given 30 seconds to answer, as we have a lot of questions pouring in.
Okay.
We have Alexandra. She asked, how do you plan to address the rising drug use and mental health issues among students in North Carolina schools? I'll start with Mrs. Morrow.
Yes, it's a dramatic concern. And so I have already been talking with student resource officers and with my security council about how we can detect drugs, whether that's having more dogs, whether that is AI systems that exist that we can have within our schools, so that our students are actually going to be held accountable for that. But in that, we need to help them to understand what the damaging impact is of different drugs. So I think when someone is caught doing that, they should have to go through a course and even write a paper about how that can impact their life physically, emotionally, and impact their future.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Yes, I certainly agree with lots of what my opponent has said, but I'll go a different direction and talk about education of parents. Oftentimes, I think that parents don't have a full appreciation of all of the issues that our children are dealing with, and so helping them become their best educators as well. We started something called Guilford Parent Academy when I was superintendent, and part of what we did is help our parents learn about really important issues, including increased drug usage, other things that might be impacting children's ability to access their educational opportunities.
Thank you so much. Next question is from Ryan. He said, mass amounts of funding for schools can often be difficult to gain. What other actions do you plan to take that are not linked to finances? I'll start with Mr. Green.
Yeah, so I never want us to overlook the need for additional funding. However, I do believe that with the funding that one has available, you need to be sure that we are putting those resources where they're going to be best utilized. And so again, leaning on that experience from GCS, where we reorganized lots of things to put more dollars into our classrooms and schools, became a critical part of what will make a difference. And I believe the same thing can happen with great direction from the state superintendent level, so that more resources are actually with our students in the classroom.
Thank you. Mrs. Morrow?
Sure. I think it's really critical that we get in there and make sure that we are not funding programs just to fund programs. We need to go in and determine what are we spending money on that potentially has not had a positive impact on our students with academic success, character development, or career preparedness within the last 5 or 10 years. And then funnel that money. First, all of the spending needs to be focused on student needs, and then classroom resources and the boots on the ground staff. We have had a dramatic dramatic increase in administrative expenses and in the salaries of administrators, and we have not seen that same growth in those that are having the day-to-day impact on our students. So I think that we're going to have to look at that, just how we redirect our money first and foremost, and then we need to look at outside sources like businesses and how can they help us, especially in that high school level, to have some great opportunities for learning that maybe they're funding and not necessarily coming from the school system itself.
Thank you very much. This next question is from Joshua, and the question is, do you have any plan in particular to address the discrepancy of school breakfasts and lunches in public schools? And do you plan to use Minnesota's example of them being free? This question is for both candidates, and we can start with Mrs. Morrow.
Yes, I absolutely think that, you know, the number one industry in all of North Carolina is farming. And so I've already been reaching out to the Agriculture Commissioner and to the FDA and USDA representatives here in North Carolina. I think that we need to invest in our farmers so that they can be bringing us healthy, nutritious meals, and that it's going to help our children in their academic success, also in their mental and behavioral issues, as well as their athletic prowess. Having been a nurse, I've studied nutrition for a long time, and I think it's a great opportunity for also to get our children engaged in how it's best to take care of your body so that your body can do the best it can be and achieve. I think we have awesome opportunities here in North Carolina to expand that and make sure that everybody gets a great meal, and it's not and there's not that discrepancy. I think everybody should be paid or should be getting a lunch every day free of charge. That should be paid for by the state.
Agree.
Yeah, so I certainly believe that we should be providing free meals for students. I actually think that it would be a great thing for us to do this for all students across the entire state for free. I think we ought to be thinking about doing this for breakfast as well. One of the things that we implemented in GCS is also trying to bring in fresh fruits and vegetables to expose our children to, really nutritious opportunities. And so I do think that this is a place where we ought to support our students by providing them with free meals and taking that burden off of, families. And then also taking stigma away from those who might not be able to otherwise afford.
All right, thank you very much. Our next question is from Tyler. And the question is, what do you plan to do if the government ever plans to shut down the Department of Education? Will you try to prevent it? And we can start with Mr. Green, and Ms. Moore, you can go after.
And so when in the question, is it that the United States Department of Education, I assume is that question. And so,
Yes,
I certainly believe that that would be the wrong move. Given across our state, about 10% of the dollars are federal dollars. So you're talking about, really impacting lots of students, particularly some of our most vulnerable. You think about our special needs students. You think about students who attend Title I schools as two examples. Shutting down the department would not be the way to go. And so I'm absolutely opposed to doing that, and will be, certainly advocating as best as I can not to have that happen.
Smart.
I absolutely am on the opposite side of this. I think we spend a lot of money paying for people in the Department of the U.S. Department of Education, probably billions of dollars. And I just have an example, like if we would keep the money here rather than paying our taxes up in DC and having to pay for the personnel in the department, then we would actually have the money here and we could control all of those things, whether it's special needs, whether it's food, whether it's the Title I and Title IX students that we need to support. So we would actually be keeping more of our tax money here, and then we would be able to better management. Just a quick example, Wake County in the year of 2022, we received $2.1 million from the U.S. Department of Education, and we spent $1.3 million just on 8 staff for our DEI department that was mandated in order to get that money. So we're actually spending money for mandated programs from the U.S. Department of Education. It's coming out of our state money and out of our local funds.
Thank you so much. The next question will be coming from Dylan. He says, how do you plan to address equity disparities within North Carolina to reach academic success for all, regardless of their school, race, socioeconomic status, etc.? I'll be starting with Mrs. Morrow.
Sure. Yeah, to your point, there are so many different needs throughout the state. And I think we do need to look at, for instance, if we are in a very rural community where there is not a strong economic backing, it is very hard to recruit and retain great teachers there. So maybe we need to be increasing, even though the cost of living might be less in that area, we need to increase the salary that we are giving to that teacher so that they can have a family there. And potentially, if there's not another job that's very lucrative for a spouse, let's say. We also need to look at in the rural areas where we have a lot more students whose potentially maybe their parents cannot be involved in their education. They don't speak English well, or they're having to work 2 or 3 jobs. We should look at putting in 2 teachers in every kindergarten through 3rd grade class if that's going to be necessary, if you don't have the familial support, the community support. So I think we do need to look at everything individually to determine what is going to work to ensure that every student gets that quality education and they're able to reach their goals.
Thank you so much.
Hard to get in there in 30 seconds, sorry.
You're good, you're good. Mr. Green?
Yeah, so I think you start first with disaggregating data, and you disaggregate it in lots of different ways to understand what the issues are and where you need to focus attention. Certainly that's the way I operated when I was superintendent of Guilford County Schools, and understood that, yeah, there are certain students or certain groups of students that might be underperforming. And so then you think about what are the additional resources necessary to support those students and improve their academic outcomes. And so it might include any number of different things necessary to make that happen. But you need to look at the data first and then have that drive your next steps.
Thank you. Another question from the audience says, how do you plan to prioritize spending in the district, especially with the cost of constructing new schools in the past few years? I'll be starting with Mr. Green.
So as I understood the question about the district, I'm going to translate that to mean the entire state of North Carolina, and how do you prioritize spending. So I do believe that you got to think about a number of things. One is, that not every district or school is equal. And so there are going to need to be additional resources provided in certain areas. We have low wealth, for example, communities that have lower tax bases. And so we may have to prioritize with more resources going to those schools. I also think that we need to be thinking about a broader, more comprehensive approach to things like construction, so that we can provide additional and new, safe facilities across our entire state of North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Morrow.
Yes, I think one of the first things we need to do is we really need to look at where that North Carolina Education Lottery money is going and where it has been going, because the whole premise of that was that was going to be used for infrastructure, specifically for buildings. We also need to look at the fact that the majority of our schools that were built, when they were built with 70-year contracts, which means that that should be a functional school and able to house our students and our staff for 70 years. So we might need to go back to some of these developers and say, okay, this needs to be changed. We need to do this at cost. There is no reason in 2024 why we've had students that have to leave school because the HVAC isn't working. We have mold, we have bathrooms and sinks that aren't working. We can do better. And so that has to be a priority for our spending to ensure that our students are safe and they have a great learning environment.
Thank you very much. This next question is from Dylan. And the question is, if elected, how will you ensure that teacher pay is increased in line with neighboring states such as South Carolina and Tennessee? We can start with Ms. Morrow.
Yeah, I think we have some really great examples even surrounding us. And so we do need to look at what's working in different areas. But to that point, we have got to prioritize our spending. And that's why I'm saying we've got to figure out where is all this money going, because we are seeing that the increases in salaries tend to be always up at the upper level of people more in the administrative level, and it's not ever tinkering down or getting down to that school, to the school teacher. So I think we absolutely have to focus funding first and foremost in our classrooms and then go upwards rather than the other way around.
Yeah, so this is a place where I do think we have to advocate for additional resources so that we can increase the compensation for our educators. So, and particularly in this instance, our teachers. So, as I shared earlier, where we find ourselves compared to the surrounding states and the nation, we are woefully underfunding our public schools. And so we need to increase the dollars. That way we can pay our teachers more as well. And that would be the top priority, is to pay our teachers more.
All right. Then our next question is from Chase. And the question is, given that the majority of students attend public schools, how do you ensure that we have the proper funds from the legislature to solve issues within public education? And if we could start with Mr. Green.
Yeah, so I think we have to have real deep conversations with our General Assembly. I think we got to think about whether, in addition to electing this position, you got to find other champions of public education. And as I said, deep conversations around things like our taxpayer-funded private school voucher program, which is literally taking hundreds of millions of dollars that could be going into our public schools, and they're now going into private schools, even for the wealthiest of the wealthy, who may already have their child in a private school, can get this money. Meanwhile, our public schools desperately need these dollars. And so these are the kind of conversations we must have with the General Assembly to turn that initiative around.
Something that we really need to consider is in the last 4 years, we've lost 10% of our students from public schools. We now have 30,000 students that are either going to private schools or they're being homeschooled. And so it's time, we need to recognize that we need to really improve what our outcome is being, especially the fact that we are losing teachers as well. So it's hard to get the General Assembly to just give more money into a system when we're losing students and we're losing staff. So I think the first thing that we need to be looking at is, how are we going to get those students back? How are we going to get our teachers? How are we going to create an environment where people want to be in the public school system? I think that's going to give us a lot more leverage to be able to go to the General Assembly and say, look, we need this because look at our success rate. But also, to the point, before we start asking the taxpayers to pay more money, we have got to be responsible with the current money that they have been spending. And over 50% of every tax dollar we spend to the state is spent on the K through 12 education system. So as much as we want to increase the salary of teachers, if you increase it by 5% and you increase their taxes by 3%, which is essentially where you get the money, right, to give back to the people, that's going to impact them as well, and everybody else that's working at the state. So it's a multifaceted system, but I think we can do it.
Thank you. Our next question is from Andrew. If you're elected, what will you do to help people have reliable transportation to and from school, especially for magnet and school choice programs in North Carolina? We can start with Ms. Moore.
Yeah, one of the things that we don't talk about a lot is the amount of miles that our bus drivers are driving every day, because right now we have a lot of students that are spending an hour and a half both ways, each way, to get back and forth from school. So I do think we need to look at how can we improve the schools in every area so that we aren't passing by 2 and 3 schools in order to get to the school that student is districted to. And I think we need to look at private entities, 13 passenger vans and different things like that, and maybe having a local pickup spot where parents could drop their kids off at a bus stop, for instance, for magnet or for charter schools, so that we can give them that opportunity.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, so I certainly think that we have to continue to provide substantial school choice within the public school arena. which then to make those choices actually effective does require that we provide transportation to all students. And so certainly things that we did again in Guilford County Schools was begin to look at where we might try to have certain drop-off points, or maybe there are management tools one can utilize to have much more effective transportation routes with less pickup points. We may have to have midpoints, but this is a complex issue, but it starts with this is important for us to provide to our students. And so we must work through those management issues.
All right, Ms. Morrow. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, all right. Our next question is from Sadaya. Do you have a plan to expand pre-K education to ensure children are fully equipped with the necessary skills before entering the public school system? We'll start with Mr. Green.
Yeah, so I certainly believe that we ought to be providing as many resources as we can so that our students can start to gain the educational opportunities as early in life as possible. So this comes within our arena somewhat, but not completely. And so I don't want to overstate all of the things that this particular position can do, but I do think it should be partnering with other agencies that do have more authority with regards to early childhood development to provide the kind of resources necessary for all of our students to be able to access these opportunities as early as possible.
Smart.
Yes, he's right. Really, DHHS has complete oversight over this. The DPI does have a little bit of that, but I just had an incredible conversation with a Dr. Conway down in Florida last week, and he was discussing how we can help our children, even at 4, just take a simple online test for them to do to figure out whether or not they might have a predisposition to some literacy issues or some developmental differences. And so that's going to be important. And they've actually been putting that into the pediatrician's offices and trying to get the pediatricians to do that at a 4-year-old visit. And I think we do need to expand and look at our churches and synagogues and other faith-based places that actually do offer those pre-K opportunities also, not just always within the public school system. In order to expand it is very important. Most probably important thing is parents reading to their children and sitting on the lap. And I think that we need to also expand that into just the knowledge base of parents understanding how important it is to just read and to speak with their youngsters.
Right. Our next question is from Chase. Students are concerned about how politics has become so ugly and divisive. As a candidate and potential elected official, what will you specifically do to change this when students are watching and learning from how officials act and what they say? We can start with Ms. Morrow.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why I don't think politics should be in the classroom. I think that our children, especially young children, once you guys get into high school, you can start discussing kind of in that debate, that Socratic circle, discussing what you believe about different things. But I really don't think that our elementary school children or middle school children really have the ability to be understanding the different nuances. So that's one of the reasons why I think it would be great for us to limit our cell phone time in the classrooms. I think if we would focus more on the issues and having logical debates, and like you guys are having tonight, which I totally appreciate that. And I think we can find that we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And I really think education, it doesn't matter your race, religion, or your politics. Everybody wants their child to get an excellent education and start in life. And I think this is one of the areas that we can come together.
You agree?
Yeah, so I think it actually starts with the leaders themselves and how they comport themselves, what they say, what they put out there in the space. When folks see that, then I think folks will follow good leadership and will be willing to appreciate those who are willing to have the kind of civil discourse that is appropriate. I think this is something that can be taught to students early and their educational journeys. But I think it starts with the folks who are in the offices, and not only what they say, but also then how they comport themselves, what they might put out in other spaces that might actually illuminate exactly who they actually are.
Thank you so much for answering these questions, and thank you to the audience for answering, having all these amazing questions and ready for them to answer. We've been doing an absolute great job. Before we move on to closing statements and things like that, I just wanted to thank a lot of the organizations such as the Mecklenburg Teen Democrats and the Mecklenburg Republicans, NC Teen Democrats, NC Teen Republicans, and the YMCA Youth in Government. These amazing people have taken a lot of time tonight, and amazing students are here tonight to ask these amazing candidates amazing questions and having a very, very educational conversation. So we really, truly thank you guys for that. Now we'll just kind of be moving into our closing statement. So each candidate, you guys can just give your closing statements and share a few thoughts that you guys have moving forward. Please go ahead, starting with Mrs. Morrow.
And before we answer, just so I know, how long do we have for a closing statement?
60 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I just want to applaud each and every one of you because I think you guys ask better questions than we've gotten in all of the 6 debates that we've done so far. So congratulations on that. That it really excites me. And I just really believe you guys are the future. And so it's so important that we give you what you need to be successful and to feel like you are ready to take on the world when you get out of high school, regardless of whether that means you're enlisting, you're enrolling, or you're going to be going into work. But I want to say this. It's important. If we do not have safety and discipline in our classrooms, it's not fair because not every student is getting that opportunity to learn. So that's going to be a priority. The other thing is academics over activism, over political agendas. That's going to be one of the tenets of what I do, and increase communication, increase collaboration, teamwork, and ensuring that our money is going to you guys first, because the system is there to support the student, not the other way around. So if you want to learn more about where I stand, you can go to my website, morrow4nc.com. That's MORROW, the number 4nc.com.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Great. Certainly want to start off by a sincere thank you for giving us this opportunity to have a conversation with each of you. I will say 3 things that I think distinguish me and my opponent. One is experience. You heard me tonight be able to loop back to actual experience and things that we've done versus someone who homeschools her children. Nothing against homeschooling, but this is a complex educational organization that we're trying to run. Second is belief in our public schools. I believe in them. My wife and I, we were blessed to have 2 children, blessed to be able to choose where we put our children. We put them in our public schools. I suggest you go online and actually read about what my opponent has called our public schools. And then third is character and judgment. You heard what we tried to do in Guilford County Schools and tried to lift this up as critically important. I would just encourage you to go online and you won't even need to spend 30 minutes to really understand a bit about my opponent and her judgment and character. I want to thank each of you for giving me this amazing opportunity tonight. For those who will be around in January, if I am elected, I would love to figure out how we can continue this conversation at that point if I am elected. Be blessed this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to both of the candidates. Thank you to all of the students that submitted questions. And just a huge thank you to our 2 student moderators. We hope all of you have an amazing day.